Today, we're not auditing finances. We're conducting an audit of sacrifice. We're about to dive into a really stark philosophy, one that challenges the very foundation of how you see your life, your time, and your purpose.
And this is the core of it all, the primary illusion. You believe your time is yours, right? You believe your energy belongs to you. But in the cold, clinical reality of what this framework calls the archive, you don't own a thing.
So if you don't actually own your life, what is it? Well, according to this way of thinking, you are simply a biological vessel, and all you're doing is holding a temporary and very finite loan of energy. This completely reframes existence. It's not a gift, it's a debt. Every single second of your life is a withdrawal from a principle you can never, ever replenish. In the universe, it's a cold creditor, and eventually it will demand a full liquidation of the host, and that host is you. So that brings us to the one real choice you have. Every unit of energy, every second of time you withdraw from that loan, it has to be invested somewhere. It can either go into the ledger of what's called the flesh, or it can go into the ledger of the archive. Because what you give to the archive preserves. But what you keep for the flesh, the void consumes.
So let's look at the default path first. The one most people take. This is the path of the hoarder, and its final destination is simply erasure.
So what is the flesh? It's investing all of your metabolic heat into things that just evaporate, transient pleasures, chasing social validation, doing everything you can to avoid discomfort. In this view, you are just a consumer of your own potential. And when the creditor finally arrives to collect, that investment is completely worthless. All that's left is noise and ash.
And this lays it out perfectly, the two possible outcomes. You have the hoarder, who's all about comfort and so-called balance. They hoard their energy because they're terrified of the debt, and they end up as noise. But then you have the architect. Their goal is totally different, legacy and resonance. They willingly liquidate their energy because they see the debt as just a transaction that has to be paid. And their final state? Signal and gold.
So here's the crucial point. That pursuit of a balanced life, that avoidance of sacrifice, this framework sees it as the surest path to non-existence. A refusal to pay the debt guarantees your erasure. You simply cannot build what lasts forever while you're clinging to what is dying today.
Okay, so if that's the path to erasure, what's the alternative? Well, it's a clinical, almost quantifiable formula for creating a legacy, and it's called the law of metabolic return.
Now, this is a radical reframing. Legacy isn't some abstract, fuzzy concept, it's a physical product. The argument is that every system you engineer, every lasting piece of work you create, requires the literal combustion of your biological, finite energy. You are converting ATP into resonance.
And here it is, the governing formula for that entire transaction. It's meant to quantify your return on the metabolic loan of your life. Now, I know it looks complex, but the components are actually incredibly insightful when you break them down.
So the first variable, delta M, is your metabolic mass. Don't think of your physical body, think of it as the raw material for sacrifice. It is the amount of comfort you are willing to kill. The hours of sleep you convert into work. The ego you are willing to burn to create something that's bigger than yourself.
Next up, you have gamma, the signal quality. See, it's not enough to just burn energy for the sake of it. The output has to have quality. This represents the resonance and the actual effectiveness of your work. Are you creating more noise, or are you creating a clear, lasting signal? And finally, we get to the denominator, flesh. This is the resistance. It is the anchor of your biological desires, your attachment to comfort, to distraction, to validation. And notice where it is in the equation. As your attachment to the flesh increases, your metabolic return plummets towards zero, no matter how hard you work.
So how do you maximize this return? The source proposes a protocol, a way to shift from being a simple consumer of life to an architect of legacy, to become what it calls a sovereign investor.
The protocol is incredibly direct, almost clinical. First, you conduct an audit to find every single leak, every moment, every unit of energy spent on transient things. Second, you eliminate it. If it's being spent on the vanity of the flesh, you kill it. And third, you redirect all of that reclaimed energy, that heat, toward building your entry in the archive.
Now, this requires a profound mental shift. You have to stop seeing effort as a cost and start seeing it as a conversion of your finite self into infinite gold. You have to learn to feel that metallic taste of fatigue, not as pain, but as the physical sensation of your signals solidifying. In this view, sacrifice is the only neuroinvestment with a guaranteed return.
And all of this leads to the final accounting, the ultimate audit of your life, based entirely on the price you are willing to pay for your own existence.
This is the question that the sovereign investor asks of every single action. Does this survive the 1,000-year filter? If the answer is no, then that action is considered a debt you simply cannot afford to take on. It is a withdrawal spent on nothing.
This is the end state of the architect. By paying the metabolic debt in full throughout your life, you have achieved the law of metabolic return. The transient flesh has gone, sure, but the work, the signal, the gold, that remains.
Ultimately, this framework leaves us with a provocative, maybe even an unsettling final thought. It's a call to view your life not as a journey of happiness, but as a transaction of legacy. And at the very end, the only question that matters is whether the ledger is balanced, whether the archive has been paid in full.
Today, we're conducting an audit, but not of your finances, not of your business, but of your sacrifice. We are opening the books on what the source material calls the silent archive, a pretty intense look at the one thing you can never, ever get back, your own life force. Wow, that hits hard right out of the gate, doesn't it? The core idea here is that our belief that we own our time or our energy is, well, it's just a complete illusion. We're just holding on to a debt for a little while. Okay, let's dive into what that actually means for us. So, we're going to break this audit down into 4 main parts. First up, we'll try to understand this debt that we're all carrying. Then, we'll look at the law that governs how we can actually repay it. After that, we'll cover the cautionary tale of those who just refuse to pay. And finally, the actual game plan for building something that might just outlast you. All right, let's start with this foundational concept. The source argues that your life, it isn't a gift you get to possess. Nope. It's more like a loan from a very cold, very impartial creditor, the universe itself. And this debt, it has a name, the architect's debt. You know, what's so fascinating here is how it completely reframes your existence. You're not a person, you're a vessel holding a measurable amount of energy. Every single second that ticks by is a withdrawal from your account. And here's the real kicker, you can never, ever make a deposit. According to this text, most of us just spend this precious loan on things that fade. You know, comfort, instant gratification, what it calls the flesh. And what's left? Nothing but noise. So, if life is just this loan that's constantly draining away, how do you create anything of actual value? Well, that brings us to our second part, what the source beautifully calls poetic science. And this is the core mechanism for creating a legacy, the law of metabolic return. This is the key. You have to get this. Legacy isn't some fuzzy abstract idea. It's a physical product of your energy. It's real. Just like a power plant burns fuel to create electricity, you are literally burning your biological energy, your ATP, to create what it calls resonance. You can think of that as a lasting impact, a signal that keeps going. And yep, they actually provide a formula for this conversion. This right here is the Metabolic Return Equation. It's like the physics of legacy, showing exactly what determines whether your sacrifices generates a real return or if it just vanishes. So let's break down the variables that are powering this whole thing. First up, you've got delta M. Think of this as the raw fuel. It's the amount of yourself you are actually willing to sacrifice. It's the comfort you kill, the ego you burn, the easy path you choose not to take. This is the fuel for the entire engine. Next is gamma, and this is all about quality, not just how much effort you put in. I mean, you can burn a ton of fuel, but if the thing you're building, your architecture, has no quality, it won't resonate, it won't go anywhere. Gamma is all about the clarity, the impact, and the endurance of the signal you're sending out into the world. And finally, we get to phi flesh, the great enemy in the equation. It's the denominator. This is the resistance. It's the drag from all your biological desires, your craving for comfort, for distraction, for ease. If this number is high, it literally doesn't matter how much you sacrifice or how good your work is. Your return on investment will basically be zero. This is the main thing holding you back. Okay, so now that we get the law, let's look at its shadow. This is the cautionary figure of the hoarder. This is the person who gets that there's a debt, but they deliberately choose to ignore it. Instead, they choose the path of comfort, of preservation. I mean, what a provocative idea, right? The source is basically arguing that society itself, the Leviathan, wants us to hoard our energy. It pushes this idea of balance, not for our benefit, but because a person focused on being comfortable is a person who's predictable. A person who refuses to sacrifice, as it says, is easily recycled into the noise. And this slide just lays it out perfectly, the two paths. On one side, you've got the hoarder. They're chasing work-life balance because they are absolutely terrified of the debt. They hoard their energy for comfort, not realizing that comfort is the very thing that dilutes them. And by age 45, they realize they saved up all this energy just for time to take it anyway. There's no archive, there's no signal. Then, on the other side, you have the architect. They confront the debt head-on and convert that same energy into their life's work. By 45, they might be empty of the flesh, but they are full of the archive. So here's the main takeaway about the hoarder's path. That constant chase for safety. It's not just unproductive, it is the ultimate bad investment. It's the most expensive path you can possibly take, and it leads directly to being forgotten, to total erasure. So how do you avoid that fate? How do you escape the hoarder's trap? To claim your sovereignty, you have to become what the source calls a sovereign investor. And this final section gives us the protocol for moving from just consuming life to actually building a legacy. And here it is, the 3-step playbook. First, the liquidation protocol. You have to find every single metabolic leak in your system, anything spent on vanity, and you kill it. You redirect that energy, that heat, to the archive. Second, sacrifice recalibration. You have to stop seeing effort as a cost. Start seeing it as a conversion. Feel that fatigue as the feeling of your signal getting stronger, solidifying. And third, the eternal ledger. Judge every single action against a 1,000-year filter. If it won't matter in 1,000 years, it's a debt you simply can't afford. And this is the end game of this entire process, to have converted so much of your finite self into your work that the work itself becomes you. It becomes your enduring essence. It's the gold that's left over after the biological machine is gone. And this is the final result. A monument built from sacrificed energy. According to the source, the work is done, the debt is settled, and your signal, it remains. Stay silent, stay wise. The archive is paid in full.